Welcome to the new episode of Dakota Boys Talk Movies. Here we are again, and of all things, just months later, because what else are we going to talk about right now? We're finally going to give our review of the Rise of Skywalker.
Some of you might be thinking, were you guys just sitting around with nothing to do? And you're like, should we get to that movie finally? Yes, that is what happened.
That is literally what happened. We were sitting here like, then the Rise of Skywalker came up, and Dakota's like, hey, should we finally review that? We haven't reviewed that yet. Like, yeah, let's do it. And so here we are.
So, Steven, before we get started, I have a question for you.
Okay.
How do you feel about Star Wars Rogue One being the movie, the Star Wars movie that has withstood the test of time under Disney? How does that make you feel?
That makes me feel great, honestly. As I did, when we first reviewed that movie, I had really mixed feelings about it.
Yes, I remember.
But I have grown to really like that movie. And now I just find it, kind of funny that is probably the best of the new bunch.
It's like the one, too, that also doesn't come with any baggage.
Yeah, and maybe that's what helps, is that the only baggage with it is Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And ironically, he probably is about the weakest thing in that movie.
Yeah.
Just because you're very distracted by how they use him and the fact that James Earl Jones sounds really old.
Which is interesting because in The Lion King, he doesn't have that. Maybe he was sick.
Yeah.
In the Lion King remake, he sounds seasoned, but not like he's on his deathbed.
Yeah, it was really, I thought that was unfortunate too, that James Earl Jones just sounded a lot older, and so it kind of hurt considering that this is supposed to be Darth Vader before A New Hope even, or around the same time as New Hope, I guess would be a better way to say it. And so, who was in the suit in Rogue One?
Obviously I don't think it was Hayden Christensen.
No, there were rumors that it was, but I don't think it was.
Is David Prowse still Prowse? He unfortunately had the, I don't even know what the phrase or word I'm looking for. He probably had.
He was lied to.
He had the worst time of it, I think, because it weighed like 70 pounds, and he couldn't breathe in it.
Well, and then I think and then in his mind it was all worth it because he was gonna, he thought it was pretty cool to play this big villain, and then he goes to the movie, finds out that it wasn't his voice, that they just kind of used his presence, and that was about it, and that he wasn't even originally credited, right? Like that got added in later.
Yeah.
That David Prowse was even Darth Vader at all. And so, I think it kind of made him a little bitter, I think, about the whole thing a little bit.
You want to know an interesting fact about that actor?
Yeah, let's hear it. Because the more we talk about this, the more we are talking about Rise of Skywalker.
He's the guy that actually got Christopher Reeve pumped up for Superman.
Oh, like trained him?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, because Christopher Reeve's kind of a beanpole, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. He was so freaking skinny. And then
That's pretty skinny.
Yeah, he packed on a lot because when you look at him, there's pictures of him before his audition, and he's just, like a cornstalk.
Huh.
But so Superman got his physique from Darth Vader.
Hey.
Do with that information what you will.
Is that what brought out the dark side in Superman 3? Oh, that was that man-made kryptonite or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is, Rise of Skywalker.
How did you feel before you saw this movie? Were you excited?
I, for the most part, was excited. I actually wasn't excited that Abrams was back, which I have stated many times before that I think even in our review of Force Awakens maybe, because by then he had already kind of screwed up the Star Trek franchise with that second one. And I think I said he's really good at starting things, but he's not the best closer. Because even a lot of his TV shows, he didn't close. He just started them and then kind of left, and other people closed them for him, like Lost, Fringe.
Yeah, he's kind of a fan of mystery boxes without them ever getting solved. He just likes having them there.
Yeah, which is almost, now that he's become this big budget director, is really his Achilles heel.
And I think it's interesting too. He's trying to fancy himself as a writer now.
Yeah,
and he's still trying to be, the modern day Steven Spielberg. And it's like, why? Spielberg never wrote anything. He directed things, and he added in, things to the plot, but he never actually wrote.
Yeah, he would put his touch on them, but he was never really the writer. I think maybe the exception was Close Encounters. Spielberg, I know, kind of like that was all kind of his idea, but I think he still had screenwriting help. And so, I guess going in, I was excited to see where they were going to go, especially after The Last Jedi, because, love it or hate it, it really had a strange ending. Everything was kind of crap at the end of Last Jedi. Everything was falling apart. Luke was dead. Then, of course, Carrie Fisher dying in real life, soon after The Last Jedi was filmed. So they didn't even have her for the filming of Rise of Skywalker, but they needed Leia to be alive. There was a lot of things just kind of working against maybe my excitement because I was like, well, they don't have Carrie Fisher. Harrison Ford is obviously, Han Solo's dead. Even though I personally enjoyed Last Jedi, like, where are they going to go with this? So there was a lot of things kind of up in the air. And then just kind of like Colin Trevorrow was going to direct it. They kicked him out, but they were still going to kind of use what he had written. And so it was like, how's that going to work with Abrams coming in and probably wanting to do his own thing? Yeah. And so it did kind of make it kind of a whole crazy thing, because then the other promise they were making with this movie is that it was going to be the bow for it was going to be the bow on the box for everything too, was the other thing they were promising. Oh, it's going to be a nice bow for the prequels. It's going to be a nice bow for the originals. It's going to be a nice bow for this trilogy. And I'm like, how are they going to pull this off in 2.5 hours on one movie when really because the previous movies really set no ground for the bow that they were supposedly tying for all of those things.
Yeah. Man, and here's the thing, whoever was going to make this movie, J.J. Abrams, Colin Trevorrow, whoever, man, did they have a heck of a time ahead of them, because so many of the things that we were J.J. Abrams kind of started, like, who's Rey's parents, who's is she going to go to the dark side, all these questions we had after watching The Force Awakens kind of got tied up in The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of, you have a trilogy of movies that they don't act like a trilogy.
They're so disconnected.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's, whoever it was, they were always going to just be a sacrificial lamb. I don't think there's anything you could have done story-wise that would have just been appealing to everybody.
No. Yeah, because, and I think that was the danger of getting who they got to kick off this trilogy, because Abrams had this vision, but for something like this, you kind of have to know where you're going. And as we've stated, I think he maybe had these ideas of where he wanted to go, but also didn't. Because like with Lucas, when he made Star Wars, all of it was laid out. He had one giant story, realized it was too much for one movie, so he was just going to make one, that could be taken as a single movie, but with the hopes of knowing he maybe he would get the chance to finish out the story. But he had the bones.
Yeah.
He had the bones, even though I'm sure he changed things. Maybe it wasn't always going to be the Ewoks, because we knew at one point he was thinking about having to be the Wookiees. But the bones were still there of where he was going to go. And this one, I don't know. Maybe Abrams maybe had some idea. Maybe he had a different plan for Snoke than what ended up happening in The Last Jedi. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if he didn't have that totally worked out yet. Because he just, like I said, I think he isn't really a closer. He was just trying to make his one movie that he was trying to make, you know? And with something like this, that was probably a dangerous way for Kennedy to allow it to go. You know, that it did kind of lack a cohesive vision. They probably should have thought that out a little bit better, because then it probably would have made the payoff of this one, even if it wasn't perfect, at least give it some... Because a lot of people will admit that Return of the Jedi is not a perfect movie. But it still was a cohesive vision with payoff that had emotional gravitas. We did commentaries of the original 3 movies. You guys can listen to if you want to. And I remember even when we were doing our commentary, here we're sitting there watching it all awkward with microphones and headphones and talking while it's going on. And I still found myself getting emotionally invested when Luke is just hacking his lightsaber at this guy that he knows is his dad. You know, you still get caught up because everything's been kind of culminating and swirling, you know, and it's all part of this big vision. Whereas in this, it was really hard to really be emotionally invested in much of anybody. I don't know, because they felt like they were all over the place. One minute, Poe Dameron feels like he's going to be this great leader, and then the next minute he feels like an immature teenager. Finn is just running around yelling, and then all of a sudden you're supposed to buy him as a general, but then all of a sudden he's running around just yelling and scared again. It just felt like, even scene to scene sometimes, you didn't know what was going on. So even though in Rise of Skywalker I can see what he was doing and I can appreciate the story arc of Rey in what they did with her, and how even when she found out she was a spoiler alert for a movie that's been out for months, even when she finds out that she's the granddaughter of Palpatine, you know, there's supposed to be like this big emotional thing of how, even though that's her physical identity, she doesn't have to accept it as who she is. That could have it didn't have as much weight as I think it probably thought it did. I think the movie thought there was more weight to that than there actually was, even if I appreciate that story.
Yeah, oh man, there's so much to say about this movie.
And I mean,
I don't really
we're
know
very late to the what more is there to say that everyone else hasn't already said, except that we realize, hey, we've talked about every other one, and we need to talk about this one. All
right. Well, yeah, it's just I think people kind of savaged this movie when it came out, and if you're listening to this, it's like, well, what do you guys have to add to it? It's like, well, with the passage of time, this movie doesn't get easier to watch.
Yeah, I think I've watched it 3 times now.
Wow, that's a couple times more than I have.
Because, you know, I saw it in theaters. I watched it with my sons, and then I watched it with my wife.
Ooh, nice.
And I actually would prefer to rewatch Last Jedi than this movie. Just because I feel like there's just more weight to the things that are going on in Last Jedi, even for its flaws, like the Hodo maneuver or whatever her name is, you know, where they just light speed into that ship. Like, I can almost forgive that, because honestly, I think Adam Driver acts the crap out of that movie. And then by Rise of Skywalker, he's holding the movie on his shoulders. And he has nothing to do, and he's still holding the movie on. He's like the Michael Fassbender of this movie. You know how, like, by, like, X-Men Apocalypse, it's like Fassbender's practically holding the X-Men franchise on his shoulders, like, because even it feels like everyone else is just like, what is even going on? And Fassbender's still acting his butt off. So I don't know. Lando's back. So that was fun. He's getting old. Guess that's how that goes.
Yeah, I was expecting more. Just they brought him back, and I thought there'd actually he'd do something. Like he'd maybe be like
he flew the Millennium Falcon, Dakota. What more? I mean, he did exactly what he did in Return of the Jedi. What more did you want of him?
I wanted the Pancake Kid by his side,
and they did it. Yeah, and then they had that creepy stare with him at the end, and if they didn't have behind-the-scenes stories telling you that that's his daughter, you'd wonder why the heck, or that it could be his daughter or something. You're like, why is he staring at that girl like that? She's way too young for him.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you'd read the extra material, you'd know that that's probably his daughter. It's like, well, if I don't read that, though, it just looks like he's creepy staring at this young woman. And given Lando's reputation, there's precedence for creepy stares. But at least there's no weird activist droid in this movie like there is in Solo. So that women's lib droid that's really annoying. Who is that? Is that the Fleabag woman?
Yeah, that's Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Man, she's the worst. God.
Well, okay then, Steven. You just insulted one of the female auteurs of our time.
Okay.
I hope you're pleased with yourself.
I'm not pleased with myself. I'm just stating a fact. She's the worst.
Oh, I can't wait to see her take on James Bond. Said nobody.
I don't care if they do a woman James Bond. I don't care if they do a black James Bond. I don't care if James Bond is somehow Mexican. Just don't pick somebody who's the worst.
You know what? They should take it in a way that no one's expecting.
Yeah.
Like he shows up in the next movie and he's an elderly Jewish man.
I think the next movie should all of a sudden just randomly be animated. Why not? And he's Jewish.
Mel Brooks could come back in and do him. That's why I say an elderly
Mel
Jewish
Brooks is Q. Yeah. So Harrison Ford, though, technically is back, kind of, in a scene in this movie. I did like that scene where they did have Han Solo appear to Kylo Ren, not as a Force ghost or anything, but just in Kylo Ren's head, basically. But I did like that scene and how they had it kind of mirror the scene from Force Awakens, and yet it kind of went the other way, whereas in Force Awakens it was Kylo just completely giving in and indulging the dark side. In this, it becomes like a scene of redemption for him, and I don't know, I thought that scene worked, but again, I think it's because Adam Driver, you know, you can say what you will about the guy, he maybe looks goofy. People I know debate if he's actually hot or not, or if he's just a goofy looking dude. He's great. He's great. I don't know. I don't really have a whole lot to say, honestly, about this movie. I guess after seeing it 3 times, I can come to the conclusion it's fine. And I think the sad part about that is that it probably should have been more than just fine. And it really had potential to be more than just fine. And I think Disney probably should have maybe just allowed another year to go by before they released it, maybe. You know, I think maybe they kind of rushed this trilogy a little bit, especially given that there wasn't a singular vision of a person. that they probably should have allowed more breathing room between the movies, but there was such a push, to get the next Star Wars movie out because they made that stupid promise where there's going to be a Star Wars movie every year. Dumbest promise ever. There doesn't need to be a Star Wars movie every year. I think they're finally realizing that now. 5 movies in, they've realized that was a mistake of a declaration to make. I'm
trying to think of where I'm at with this movie. I don't particularly like it. And it seems, oh my gosh.
To me, it's kind of like Sierra Mist, this movie, where it's like, yeah, I guess I'm drinking something that's sweet and fizzy, but it kind of just still leaves you kind of wanting when you're done with it.
Oh, man.
That's basically Sierra Mist to me.
Yeah, it's almost like somebody threw... you could kind of carve this movie up into like 3-minute sections, and just watch them like that.
Yeah.
It's just so convoluted. I just couldn't like the movie even when I went to theaters probably like the last week it was here.
And they introduced too many new things all of a sudden in it that really end up damaging the rest of Star Wars. Like,
yeah,
her healing power. You can make another person come back from the dead with the Force. I just think of all these things that are really problematic for other Star Wars movies, really. And
yeah, to use a quote from The Force Awakens, that's not how the Force works.
Well, and maybe it is, but it was all of a sudden introduced so late that it doesn't, that you just like, well, if that exists, why didn't, I think back, okay, like Phantom Menace. So Qui-Gon wasn't dead. Could Obi-Wan have healed Qui-Gon's lightsaber wound with the Force like Rey did with that ripped up snake or whatever, or that, they did it in Mandalorian now too with Baby Yoda or the child, healing Carl Weathers' arm and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, so could Obi-Wan have done that to Qui-Gon, but Qui-Gon wanted to die and so it was okay? Or, I mean, it just, these are the things that just end up becoming problematic because you're all of a sudden, it was too big of a deal to do that 9 movies in. It's one thing if like all of a sudden you find out like, oh, this person can jump a little higher, like, it'd be one thing if all of a sudden like, oh, Kylo Ren's able to jump 10 feet higher than other Jedi. Well, that wouldn't be that big of a deal. It's just like, oh, he was able to connect with the physical part of the Force that helps him jump higher. But that isn't a new power. That's just him harnessing that power better. These things that are basically, in terms of someone just watching these movies, is basically a new Force power. That's when it becomes kind of problematic. So... kind of like when they changed Superman from just leaping over tall buildings to being able to fly. So, because if you watch the old Max Fleischer cartoons, he doesn't fly.
Yeah.
He leaps for a long ways, like the Hulk in that Ang Lee movie, where he just jumps for like 3 miles.
Oh, man, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know.
Did this movie do anything good that you thought was enjoyable?
Well, like I said, I always enjoy the droids. Not that crap one in Solo, but most of the other droids. And it was always fun to see C-3PO back. I did like Kerry Russell's character. I just wish she had more to do. But then introducing her caused something really confusing because then it leads us to believe that Poe Dameron used to be like an illegal trader or something. And it was like... well, that would be interesting to know about. Can we have that movie where he was like a spice runner or something? But I did think that she seemed like a cool character that I wish I got to know more. But when she's introduced right at the end of a culminating chapter of a series, it makes it tricky. I always enjoy Chewie. Chewie's always fun. I do like the new guy they got playing Chewie. I like the physicality he brings to it. My wife thinks I'm pretentious when I say that Chewie was the best thing about Solo. She thinks it's pretentious because that guy is just basically sitting there roaring and everyone else is actually acting. And I said, you just don't get it, which is probably something a pretentious person says. But, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, I feel like the character arcs aren't necessarily bad. It's just that it felt like this was disconnected from the other movies, though. You know, I feel like I still haven't seen this story close. I mean, I feel like I saw, like, I don't know. It's, you know what I mean? Where it's like, I guess it's over, but it feels like it isn't. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's just kind of weird. I remember, like, when I saw it in theaters, I feel like with Force Awakens, when that movie was over, I left the theater with my heart just racing, and I was so excited. I had a stupid smile on my face because it was just like such a fun movie. And this one, I should have felt that probably even more since it was supposed to be this culmination thing. And I just kind of was like, all right, guys, grab your coats. You guys ready to go? You know, it just was kind of over. And so I guess that was just kind of sad.
Yeah, say what you will about The Force Awakens, but I remember, oh man, it was such an enjoyable movie.
And I think what was hard is that we just had Marvel Avengers Endgame earlier in the year. That actually did tie up a franchise series probably about one of the best ways you could, where it didn't accidentally linger too long like Lord of the Rings kind of did, where it kind of had too many closings. And that even though that was the culmination of a bunch of different directors' movies, you still had the singular vision of kind of Kevin Feige holding it all together. And I think if the main creative producer for the Kevin Feige of Star Wars is basically Kathleen Kennedy, is so she should have been the one that made sure the vision carried through, and I think she thought she did, but she very much did not. And I don't know if they just got so excited about getting Rian Johnson that they just kind of let him have more creative control than they... I don't know, because even though I like Last Jedi, it did really just kind of screw up this trilogy. Or did Force Awakens screw up this trilogy by having too much mystery box? Like with the whole, who is Rey's parents? And where did Snoke come from? So was this trilogy already screwed from the get-go, or was it Last Jedi's fault? Or is it both? Maybe it's both.
You know, I was actually just going to say I think it's a little bit of both, because really, you know, after the Force Awakens, after the Force Awakens came out, and we were waiting for the Last Jedi, there were all these theories, and I got a sensation that we had kind of hyped things up to the point where there was no possible resolution where everyone was going to be happy.
Sure. Yeah, that is true too.
Yeah.
And this would be the first Star Wars trilogy that the internet is in full force, because even the prequels, I mean, obviously the internet existed, but not to the point it does now, where there's just article upon article and social media upon social media constantly telling you this new theory, or Hayden Christensen was seen walking on the Lucasfilm lot. Does this mean he's here? And then people basically creating whole videos on YouTube about how Hayden Christensen could be in whatever movie, you know. And so I think you're right, and it's like, but why? And this is the question. This is the question of the century here. Well, it's not, but it is in the case of this. Why are Star Wars fans so finicky now? Where they're just like, it just seems like they're always let down or something. Or I don't know. Is it because they've just created so much of it in their head that they can never be pleased by anything they see on the screen?
I really think that's the heart of the problem here. It's kind of, to be honest with you, I think that's the problem with Superman. And it's also, I think it was one of the issues with Wonder Woman. There's just, everyone kind of has this version of them in their head. And I think sometimes, I know, especially with some of the Supermen we've gotten, there's no way that the actors can sometimes kind of live up to the expectations that we have. And I think with this movie, I mean, it's just, I don't know. Everyone thought it was going to like put a bandage on Star Wars and we were all going to be okay. The franchise was going to be stronger than it ever was before. The fans were going to come together and we were all just going to, like, in Times Square when the Nazis got beaten, everyone's like kissing each other. And, but no, that didn't happen. I don't think that was ever going to happen. You could have had George Lucas directing and writing this movie, and I don't think anything he did. Lawrence Kasdan could have came back in and gave him some pointers. But
but he wrote Solo.
Oh, but
did he create that droid that I hate? I'm just gonna keep bringing that up.
Oh, he most likely did.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, I don't think there was ever going to be an outcome where the fan base was satisfied with the ending of this movie.
Yeah, really, especially by the time that it was going to be released, it was doomed, really, in a lot of ways. So, where does that leave Star Wars going forward then? I'm actually still optimistic.
Yeah, I hope we don't see any movies for a while, to be honest with you, but I'm down for TV shows and everything.
It looks like we're for sure a couple of years away from another Star Wars movie, which isn't a long time, but in terms of something like Star Wars, like 4 years is a long time.
Yeah. Here's the thing, too, about that people forget about Star Wars.
4 years, whatever.
Here's the thing about Star Wars fans that people kind of forget. I think they're forgiving in the end.
Yeah.
Like, Hayden Christensen got just torn to shreds on his performance in the prequel movies.
Yeah.
But now it's like people look at him like, oh, we treated you way too harshly. I'm sorry, man.
And they want him to come back.
Yeah.
And I think part of it, too, is that, the people that were kids when those movies came out are now in their 20s.
Yeah.
And those are the Star Wars they're nostalgic to. And so now we're just becoming the grumpy old men, you and I. And there's now a group of next generation under us that have different nostalgias than us. And because we're kind of, as far as Star Wars, we're kind of tweeners. Because when we were kids, it was like in between Star Wars.
Yeah.
And so obviously I grew up watching the original trilogy, but not when it was new and fresh, but when we were kind of in this in-between world, and there was just kind of this whisper in the air that Lucas might come back and do the Darth Vader story.
Thankfully, we were able to see Star Wars before he started messing with them.
Yeah,
too.
and that was the thing, is like that was my first memories of Star Wars are before the special edition stuff. But yeah, I guess I still am optimistic just because I think there's a lot of stories to tell, and I think what has really been bogging down the Star Wars movies right now is they're constantly making Skywalker movies, and I feel like they've kind of basically said, Skywalker's over, now we can move on. And it's kind of like, thank God. I think I'm ready to move on. And I think Mandalorian Season 1 kind of really showed that a majority of the fans are ready to move on, because that show has really no Jedi, really no Force. Maybe there might be here and there things, but it's just kind of stuff in that world that you're familiar with, and it's still really fun and is probably one of the fresher things to really come out, come out of Star Wars in recent times now. And so I think that's leaving people a little more optimistic. And then when some of that creative talent that worked on The Mandalorian is now being announced to be doing other Star Wars things, whether movies or TV shows, it does make you a little more optimistic about the future. And it seems like what I like about TV too is you have breathing room where you have 6 or 8 hours to tell a story, instead of 2 hours, or whatever. And I guess a trilogy a trilogy of movies is 6 to 8 hours in a sense, but I don't know. I think the future of Star Wars is really series, just because it does allow you the breathing room just to play around with stuff. So I'm excited about the series stuff. But when I hear names like Taika Waititi come up with Star Wars, I mean, that gets me excited too. So,
yeah, I think another thing, I think the idea of like a trilogy at this point is kind of played out.
Yeah.
Maybe this trilogy, the current one that just ended, maybe it shouldn't have been a trilogy. Maybe they should have aimed for like 5 movies.
Maybe. I mean, Thor's getting another movie. He's not even going. I mean, Thor's not going to be a trilogy, and so Marvel's even getting away from having to be 3 or whatever. And so, and some things just kind of end up being a trilogy for different, like like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans. There was going to be a 4th one. So yeah, maybe and maybe that's another thing, Dakota, they have to think about is, well, there's a couple ways you can go with this. Like, maybe somebody has a really good Star Wars idea, but to make 3 movies is too much, and they make it 2 movies. You use 2 movies to tell a story. Or maybe they have too big of a saga, and you do go 4 or 5. And so hopefully they are flexible where not everything has to be this magic trilogy. Because, I mean, I think, as we've seen in some cases, there's some movies where it's like, this didn't need to be 3 movies, like they could have probably put this into like a couple movies or something. And so, and I know it's like, then they lose a movie for money reasons or whatever. But at the same time, are you losing money? Because if you're keeping something fresh and doing it in a way where you're keeping your fans excited and coming back for more, are you really out in the end? Because you're not, if you're working your butt off to make sure you're not putting that bad taste in their mouth, but, like, let's just work on making good stories. If it's 2 movies, it's 2 movies. If it's 5 movies, it's 5 movies. And you're always just working about making sure you're giving them a quality product. That's how the money comes in, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
I would hope so. Maybe this is me being a little too idealistic, but it's just my 2 cents on that. Speaking of our 2 cents, I think that's probably enough.
Well, what do you? How should we rate? Should we rate this?
Oh,
thumbs up, thumbs down.
Let's 5 lightsabers. I'm gonna put my hand behind my back, and how many lightsabers appear in my hand? Force shot to me from Rey. I guess I don't know. 3 out of 5 seems a little low. Maybe I'll go with 3.5 out of 5. I'd give this movie.
Wow.
Just because there's entertaining things to it, but it's not a complete dumpster fire. And so I'm going to give it right in that entertaining, but not my favorite type thing. So, and I feel pretty set on that because Rogue One, when we reviewed Rogue One, I had seen it once and I was really up in the air about it, and then that grew on me. But I don't know if Rise of Skywalker is really ever going to totally grow on me much more than that. So, yeah. Dakota, what about you?
Oh, I got to do one.
One lightsaber out of 5?
Yeah. I wasn't even really entertained with this movie either. I was...
What about Babu Frick?
I struggled to just not... I saw this in the theater, and I really was just tempted to just get out my phone and, like, scroll through, the Facebook news feed.
Like, let's go over to We Got This Covered. Like, Dakota's just reading clickbait sites because he's so bored. Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
But really, not even 2, huh? 1.
No, it's just... the whole movie was just... I didn't understand what was going on. And then the mess with somebody, because a friend of mine went to go see this. I just started bringing up things in the car ride home that didn't happen, and he was like, "What? That happened?" I was like, "No, that did not happen at all."
Yeah. Yeah. Now that I think about things we need to talk about, like they're all of a sudden on this hunt for these Sith things that lead them to this. There's so many things like that are just like, oh my gosh. Then she holds that knife up and it's like the curve of the Death Star thing. And I'm like, what if that would have deteriorated differently? There's just things like that. And I know like it's kind of an Indiana Jones type moment. And there's things in Indiana Jones that don't make sense either. But I think you don't think about it when you're watching Indiana Jones because it's a good movie.
Yeah.
And you think about it in this movie because you're like you said, you're kind of like, what are they even doing? They're falling in the ground and healing worms. Like, what is happening?
Something that's interesting. This has nothing to do with this movie.
That's all right. Or snake, not a worm, maybe.
I'm going to bring it up anyway. The guys that wrote some of the Marvel movies, no one really asked them, but they kind of... threw it out there anyway, and nobody really listened to them. But they were asked like, how would you fix the DC extended universe? And their answers were, oh, I do this and I do that. Somebody should ask them how they would have handled this movie, as opposed to what we got.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Is it the? Oh god, what are they? I was trying to find them. Is it the guys who wrote like Winter Soldier and a lot of the ones?
Yeah,
like McFeely and Stephen McFeely and something.
Yeah, the 2 guys.
Yeah, they're the ones who really. I think they're kind of the unsung heroes that help really tie together the cinematic universe for Marvel. Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely. I think one of the first ones they worked on was Captain America: The First Avenger, and then they kind of were the main writers in a lot of the movies from there on out. Yeah, it'll it's something. But I think that's the thing there is here we're seeing that there was a point in the Marvel Cinematic Universe where not only were you relying on this creative producer to help carry the vision through, you also kept these writers around who kind of had an idea and a vision of things were going, and all of that was kind of missing in these Star Wars movies where it was like, well, this person wrote that one and then this guy came in and wrote this one, and that works if you have crossover in the writer's room like a TV series. It's not like 2 people write every episode of a good TV show. But there's a crossover in the writer's room where everybody still knows what's going on and they kind of have their timeline of events of where they're leading. But it just feels like nobody knew where this was really going until they had to come up with where it was going. And so, kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there could be some good stuff coming down the pipeline. So...
what a very unfortunate way to end a trilogy of movies.
Well, in 9 movies, and because, and apparently the Clone Wars too, because you heard Ashley Eckstein's voice in this movie too. So,
Yeah.
They had a little bit of everything going on. So
it is troubling that this movie basically implies that Ahsoka Tano's dead. I mean...
Yeah.
But to be fair, she would have been pretty old
Yeah,
at this point in
I guess
time.
I don't know what her species lives for, so maybe that is normal that she should be dead. So... but maybe she was alive and just broadcasting from across the universe. You know, like, I'm here broadcasting live from, wherever I am. So, but yeah, so Rise of Skywalker, there you go. How do you feel about it? Tell us all these months later. But it was kind of one of those things where it was like, just like the creative forces behind this franchise, we had to do this to finish it. So...
Yeah, we, like Steven said, we reviewed all the other ones, and we had to put our stamp on this one.
In the words of the wise people before us, why not? So anyway, hopefully you found something new and fresh in here that you cared about. And we, like I said, we would love to hear your thoughts on really anything. How you hate our voices, how you think our opinions are dumb. Heck, we don't care. Negative stuff is great too. That's how we grow. That's how we forge into something better through negativeness. We love it. So yeah, just anything. But the best ways to do that are, we on Facebook, where we try to stay pretty active, put up things on Facebook, so you can always write stuff on our stuff on there, in the comments or anything like that. But also we are on iTunes, YouTube, all those places, so you can always subscribe there. You could rate us. You could give us your 2 cents in any of those places. We'd love to hear that. And so with that being said, thank you for listening to this episode. This is Steven.
This is Dakota.
Have a great day, afternoon, night, whenever you're listening. Goodbye.